Here is my complete guide to the Desert Perpetual raid. It is very mechanics heavy, but I'll do my best to explain everything so clearly that anyone will be able to understand. Okay, first thing to point out is the encounters in this raid are non-linear, meaning there is no official first, second, or third encounter. You can take them on in whatever order you choose. When you start up the raid and find yourself in this wide open area, look for the giant purple tower. If you go around to the back of the tower, you can take a gravity lift up to the top. Up there is how you choose your battle. Facing the same direction you rode the lift up, aka facing the dead center of the main area, your choices are off to the right, the Wyvern encounter, off to the left, the Hydra encounter, back behind you, the Hobgoblin encounter, and just ahead of you in this very area, the final boss, which obviously you won't be able to do until the other 3 encounters are complete. Activate whichever plate you like to choose your encounter and follow the direction of the now straightened orbs. Complete a brief jumping puzzle to get to the encounter and you'll find yourself there. If you find for any reason you can't activate a plate, that means you need to kill more adds in the area. There's usually a unique yellow bar Vex somewhere that you gotta kill before you're able to activate a plate. This also means, by the way, that when you're done with any encounter, you have to take the same jumping puzzle back to the main area and ride the grav lift all the way up to the top of the tower again. This honestly is going to be very frustrating for some people who do not like jumping puzzles, as you're going to be doing a lot of jumping from encounter to encounter, but what are you going to do? All right, the Hydra encounter, aka Epoptes, Lord of Quanta. Your goal is to kill the big bad Hydra, but of course you need to activate damage phase first. Here's how to do that. Think of the map as a giant circle with both a left and right side. The boss is right there in the middle, and as always, graphic design is my passion. This area you should consider the outside area, but know that each side of the map has a side room which you can access via one of 2 small doors. You should also take note of the following pillar, which should be right around here in the center of the outside area. Looking in-game, you'll notice that this pillar is kind of divided into 2 sides, with 3 eyes on either side. But we'll get back to that pillar a little bit later. You're going to want to divide your team into 2 groups of 3 on the left side of the area and 3 on the right. Players on each side can pick one of 3 roles. You can be A side room eye shooter, B, an outside pillar shooter, or C, ad clear, the boring role. And if you volunteer for this, come on man, take a risk once in a while with your plain Cheerios eating ass. Anyway, when the encounter begins, Vex will spawn everywhere and everyone should start killing them. Eventually, Minotaurs will spawn in, and when the Minotaurs on your team side of the area are dead, a Cyclops will spawn on your side of the map. When you kill the Cyclops, a nearby Vex plate will come to life. You'll know the plate is on because it'll have whitish threads hovering above it. The player on each side who is taking the side room eye shooter role should now step onto their respected Vex plate to receive a unique buff, which you'll see active on the top of your HUD. Be aware, both players need to be standing on the plate at the same time in order to receive their buff. If only one of the players stands on the plate, they won't get a buff, so make sure you're both communicating. When each of those 2 players gets their unique buff, they should now head into their respective side room. When inside, they'll be faced with a Hydra who has a rotating shield. In the center of that Hydra shield, you are going to see a large eye with several smaller eyes around it. The large eye should be shining bright like a flashlight. The side room player's goal is to stand in the beam of that flashlight, meaning, yeah, you're going to have to rotate around the room as the shield turns, and that'll do 2 things. 1, if you're standing in the beam, it'll pause the countdown timer of your buff, which is good because when that timer expires, you will die. And thing number 2, it'll open the smaller eyes on the Hydra shield, which you can then shoot and break in a very particular order. What's the order, you might wonder? Well, look right over there. As long as you're standing in the flashlight vision of the Hydra, a little wall of eyes will open up in the room along with you. However, these callouts are not for your own Hydra, they're for the player on the other side room on the other side of the map, meaning the 2 side room players, even though they're an entire map away, have to to call out to each other on what eyes they need to shoot on their own shield. For example, when I run into the side room and see this call out, that means I need to tell the other side room guy that they need to shoot the bottom middle eye on their shield first. You're gonna be calling out a lot to each other and it might get confusing, but be patient with your dance partner and eventually you'll get into a rhythm together. I suggest using the following callouts, but do whatever you want. Oh, and by the way, if you F up and shoot the wrong eye, you'll be penalized in the form of some eyes respawning, so be patient. After each of you have shot and broken a few eyes, I think 4, the eyes will eventually close temporarily. Don't panic, this is normal. Eventually you'll see 3 tiny orbs appear above your Hydra in a triangle formation. You now need to shoot one and only one of those orbs, and one of your teammates outside is going to tell you which one to shoot. I'll explain how they know which one to shoot later. When they tell you which one, either left, right, or top, shoot and break it, which again you can only do if you're standing in the rotating beam of the Hydra shield. Also take note, the triangle of orbs does not rotate with the Hydra shield, meaning this orb will always be the left orb no matter what, and this will always be the right orb no matter where you are in the room, so be sure to shoot and break the correct orb no matter where in the room you are. Destroying the correct orb is crucial because you're helping your team prevent an incoming wipe mechanic that will murder your team if not done properly. When the correct orb is broken, you can head back outside to join your teammates for more ad killing and to eventually kill another Cyclops so you can get back on the now activated plate, reapply your buff, and head back into the side room one last time. Once inside, it is the same thing as before. You gotta finish shooting and breaking the little eyes on the Hydra shield. Again, listen to the callouts from the guy in the other side room on the other side of the map and give him your callouts, breaking the remaining little eyes, and then finally break the big flashlight eye in the dead center. When you do, the side room Hydra will explode and you should now leave to head back to the outside area. Your final job before starting DPS is to stand in the bright shining light of the rotating shield of the big bad boss in the middle. Take note that even though the boss has 2 rotating shields, only one of them will appear to shine brightly to you. So find whichever one that is, stand directly in front of it, and then shoot it and break the eye of the shield, which will break the shield, and when both shields are broken, one by each side room player, DPS will begin. But wait a minute, earlier I said that side room players have to shoot a specific orb above their side room Hydras in order to prevent a wipe mechanic. Who gives them that call out and how do they get it? Very quickly, why don't we talk about the role of the outside pillar shooter. While the inner side room folks are doing their thing, the outside players are killing Vex. When you see text on your HUD that says Epoptes blocks the unforeseen and prompts function collapse, that means that the outside pillar shooters need to take action. They should stand on the outside Vex plate to get the unique buff, the same one that the side players got earlier, and when they have it, they need to head to the dead center of the outside area where the boss is and stand in the flashlight beam of his shield. Each player will only see one of his 2 shields illuminated, so look for the one that is lit up brightly. When you stand in the path of the beam, you'll now see this. 2 eyes on your side of what I'm calling the eye pillar will light up brightly. The eye that is not lit up is what you need to call out to your side room player, and that is how they know which orb to shoot above their Hydra. So in this particular example, I would call out left because that eye is not lit up, and my side room player would shoot the orb on the left. But wait, there's more. After you give that call out, you now need to shoot 2 particular eyes on the other side of the eye pillar. Remember how there are 2 players doing the quote outside pillar shooter role? Well, whatever eye the other pillar guy called out, you now have to shoot the other 2. So in this example, my other pillar guy called out top. So I shoot both the left and right eyes on his side of the pillar. And same thing for him. He now needs to shoot the 2 eyes on my side of the pillar that I didn't call out. And again, you have to be in the big flashlight vision of the big boss Hydra shield or you won't be able to shoot those eyes on the pillar. When you've done that, congratulations, all of you have successfully prevented the wipe mechanic. Alright, so everyone does what they're supposed to, both the outside pillar folk and the side room players. You've prevented the wipe mechanic mechanic and de-shielded the big boy, and finally it is freaking DPS time. Back to my beautiful map, you want to stand here, aka directly in front of the big eye pillar. You don't have to stand there, but most people do because the ground is slightly elevated there. Shoot the Hydra in the head as much as you can, but keep your eye on your HUD. Epoptes will call out the names of 2 players and quote, pull them through time. The 2 names that get mentioned, those 2 players should immediately stop DPSing and now look for which of the 2 bosses' 2 shields are now glowing with flashlight vision. Each player should see a different shield glowing, so there's no chance you both have the same shield. Whichever shield has the glowing flashlight vision, head right to it and stand in its path as it rotates. Until you do this, the boss will be temporarily re-shielded even if you're in the middle of DPS phase. After a few seconds, many little eyes will appear on the shields and you now have to shoot and pop all the little eyes followed by the big eye in the center. If both players successfully break the shield, congrats, you've extended the DPS timer by kind of a big amount. And when both shields are popped, those 2 players should obviously rejoin the DPS team. That exact mechanic will happen 3 times during a DPS phase, and every player will be selected exactly 1 time, so be ready for your turn. If you fail, it's not the end of the world, but it does mean you'll have a shorter DPS phase overall. At the end of DPS phase, when the boss is fully re-shielded, then do it all over again. Rinse and repeat from the beginning until the boss is dead. Alright, the Wyvern encounter. Your goal here is to kill Iatros the Wyvern. Obviously, he is shielded, so you need to first activate the DPS phase while also preventing the wipe mechanic. Here's a very basic diagram of the area. There's obviously way more to it than this, but it'll do for now. There are 3 main areas to take note of, each with different elevations. The blue plate is kind of the middle elevation, the white plate is the high elevation, and the red plate is the low elevation area. Try to remember where each plate is because when DPS begins, the boss will appear at one of those plates. Begin the encounter by heading towards the blue plate. When you do, the boss will come to life and start attacking you, but also 6 minotaurs will spawn in at the blue plate area. When killed, each minotaur will drop this. The in-game name for these items are chronons, but most players I know just call it sand. Pick up the sand, and when you see it in your HUD, you should now jump through the nearby ring, which is sitting directly above a large empty sphere. By jumping through the ring when you have sand, you are basically depositing sand into a giant hourglass. By the way, take note of the color of the ring that you're jumping through, as the color of the ring indicates which plate the DPS phase will eventually begin on. The more you deposit sand into the hourglass, the more it will fill up with sand visually. It is very important to make sure that the hourglass does not run out of sand because that is your wipe mechanic. That is to say, the sand will expire over time, and when that timer runs out, your team will all die. With that in mind, at the beginning, before doing anything else, have all 6 players each grab a sand, and then everyone should jump through the ring. Be careful, don't bump your homies off the map. But yeah, jump through with the sand and fill the hourglass completely. Then by shooting the small crystal thingy beneath the hourglass, you kind of start the encounter for real, and kick off the wipe mechanic timer. Breaking that crystal under the hourglass will also activate a very annoying mechanic that your entire fire team now has to deal with. The diastole timer, which will appear every few seconds on repeat until after the DPS phase is over. There will be 4 boxes that tick 1 at a time. When the 4th box ticks, your guardian will get launched up into the air. Again, this will happen constantly. To be honest, you kind of have to just get used to it, but if you time it right, you can just hit the jump button before the 4th box ticks. You'll still jump, manually you'll jump, but only a regular jump instead of getting completely launched into the air. Keep that in mind for DPS phase, by the way. But yeah, the annoying diastole mechanic also serves as a very important function in getting to the DPS phase. Let's talk about that. 3 players on your team need to decide before beginning the encounter who is going to be on team tower shooting. This role may seem easy, but it's very nerve-inducing, and no joke, if you're not really good at playing rhythm games, you should probably not do this role. You may notice in the area that there are 3 large towers, and each each of them looks like this. Each tower has 3 white cubes on it, one near the bottom, one near the middle, and one near the top. After sand has been dunked into the hourglass by jumping through the ring, the 3 tower shooter players should immediately each head to a different tower. You don't gotta be directly under it, but be nearby and definitely have your tower in your sights or near in your sights at all times. When the diastole jump mechanic begins, here's what the 3 tower shooters need to do. They all need to shoot the bottom square on the tower at the exact same moment. The exact timing is between the 3rd and 4th boxes ticking during the diastole mechanic. Not exactly, a little bit closer to the 4th box ticking. Basically, you all want to shoot and break the box right before the 4th box ticks, but not on the 4th tick. I know that is hard to understand. Please observe this clip. Again, every tower player needs to shoot their bottom box at the same time. You'll know your timing was good if a little white diamond appears, and you'll know you've all succeeded if you see text in your HUD that says Iatros loses control of phase space. If you fail, which you'll know you failed if that loses control text I mentioned does not appear, or if you see red appear as the cube breaks to whoever on the team effed up, you can always just try again. Keep in mind though that every time you fail, your hourglass will lose sand, meaning you're speeding up the team's wipe mechanic timer, which is bad. Take note, by the way, tower shooters don't have to shoot the cubes immediately, nor do you have to shoot them every time the timer appears. You can take a few moments of feeling out the diastole rhythm timer to kind of figure out the pacing of when you need to shoot. Obviously, don't wait forever because the wipe mechanic is constantly ticking and time is precious, but don't rush yourselves too much. When you've successfully shot the bottom cube at the exact same time, you'll then have to do the same thing with the middle cube and then finally the top cube of your tower. But not all right away. You're basically waiting to hear from one member of your team before shooting the next cube up on the totem pole, and that person is the climber. One person on your team should volunteer to be the climber before starting the encounter. At the beginning of the encounter, i.e. when you've dunked all your sand and then shot the hourglass to officially begin the timer, one of 3 plates will look like this. Basically, whatever the color of the ring was when the encounter began, that is what color plate will come to life when the encounter begins, so be sure to head there right away. It's basically your starting point of where you're going to begin jumping as the tower people make their own progress. Translation: when the tower team shoots their cube at the same moment successfully, platforms will appear for you, provided you have the buff. So when the encounter begins, stand on the glowing plate and get your buff called Absolute Temporality and start jumping up on the now appeared platforms when the tower team succeeds in shooting a cube together. However, the climber will only be able to get so high until there are no more platforms. Now is when the climber should tell the tower shooters that they should all shoot the middlemost cube on their next rotation. If and when they do, more platforms will appear and the climber can keep jumping up. Again, they'll run out of platforms and they need to again tell the tower team, hey, on the next beat, shoot the top cube at the same time, and if they do, boom, more platforms will appear. This is a delicate dance of timing between the climber and the tower shooters, who should be communicating a lot. Especially because when the tower shooters successfully break the cube at the same time, not only do new platforms appear for the climber, but the old platforms will vanish. So basically, if somebody F's up their timing, the climber will fall and you'll have to start over. Climbers should be very aware of Vex imp swarms, by the way, which will be harassing them constantly as they climb. Maybe bring a hard-hitting special weapon so you can blow them away right when they show up. When the climber reaches the top, they'll find this, a little white activation cube. Activating that will begin the DPS phase, but don't feel you have to activate it right away. In fact, you probably shouldn't. Tell your homies that they should now head to the DPS location, which, remember, is the plate matching the color of the ring hovering over the hourglass. When the climber activates the white button, they can now drop down and join their buddies for DPS. You can either DPS the Wyvern up close with close range weapons, or you can simply understand what route he'll take and post up in the direction in which he will walk to. Going back to our lovely diagram, if DPS begins at the red plate, the boss will always walk up towards the blue plate. If DPS begins at the blue plate, plate, the boss will always walk up towards the white plate. If DPS begins at the white plate, the boss will always walk down to the blue plate. Post up wherever you like, DPS until you can't anymore, then rinse and repeat. By the way, depending on how efficient your tower shooters were or how long it took you to get to DPS, it's possible to run out of sand during the DPS encounter, which again will wipe you if all the sand runs out. So if you notice your hourglass is low on sand before or during the beginning of your DPS encounter, run around and find minotaurs to kill so you can grab sand and leap through the ring to dunk more sand. If you're towards the end of your DPS phase though, don't worry about the timer super much, because after each DPS phase, the sand in the hourglass will reset and you'll have 6 new minotaurs to kill, again all spawning at the blue plate. Rinse and repeat from step 1 until the boss is dead. Oh yeah, and other 2 players on the team, not only should you be focusing on ad clear, but keep your eye on the hourglass, and if it's getting too low, find minotaurs in the area to kill who occasionally spawn in 2 at a time, so you can dunk more sand if you need to. And of course, be careful of the boss who roams around the map and may stomp all over your ass if he wanders across your path. That goes for everybody, by the way. Good luck. All right, the Hobgoblin encounter. Your goal, shockingly, is to again kill a boss, but first you basically have to annoy him to the point where he turns off his clones and comes down from his little sniper perch. Here's how to do that. You'll notice that the area has 5 golden rings in the very center. I'm not going to call these portals because there are actually portals around the outside of the area where Vex can and will spawn in a lot. Start the encounter by running towards the center area, although don't step on those 3 Vex plates just yet. Run around, dodging incoming sniper fire from the boss and killing the Vex that spawn in. Eventually, a Hydra will appear. Killing the Hydra will cause 5 Minotaurs to spawn in, 1 from each of the 5 portals around the edge of the map. Find and kill these Hydras, and take note that each will drop a pile of sand, like the Wyvern encounter. Grab the sand, and now that you have it, go and run through one of the 5 rings, and when you do it, it'll power up with blue energy in the middle. Your first goal is to basically grab sand, run through, and activate each of the 5 rings. Take note, by the way, that when 5 Minotaurs are dead, another Hydra will spawn in, and so on and so forth. TLDR, you're usually going to be dealing with either Minotaurs or a Hydra at some point, because killing all of one spawns the other. Eventually, the boss will get mad and send 3 Wyverns into the encounter. They're not really special, they're only meant to trip you up, so kill them right away. Keep killing ads, and eventually the boss will become so annoyed with you that 2 things will happen. Thing number 1 that happens: one of his clones will start targeting you with a high-powered laser rifle attack. Anytime that any player is within line of sight of the boss at this point forward will have a timer on their HUD. If the timer reaches 0, you get shot. Thankfully, all you have to do is hide and break line of sight, and the timer will completely reset, so his shot is easy to avoid, but always be aware of where that clone is that is actively targeting all players. At this point, 3 players on your team can now step onto each of the 3 Vex plates near the center area. When you all step on the plates at the same time, you'll each get a buff. Again, referring to my map, whoever steps on the left plate will get the cyclical buff, whoever stands in the middle will get the absolute buff, and whoever stands on the right plate will get the constant buff. Take a look at the name of whichever boss is auto-targeting people with his death beam rifle. Whatever name that boss has, the player with the corresponding buff name should basically run across the map and go directly underneath the boss clone that is actively targeting people. Somewhere under that boss's sniper perch at the ground level, you will find this, a little terminal that you can activate, and when you do, you'll see on your HUD that you now have an alignment charge meter with 5 empty boxes. For now, just return to the center of the map and continue to ad clear. The second thing that happens when the boss gets mad is that he is going to basically deactivate 4 of the 5 rings that you turned on earlier. The only problem is only certain players on the fire team know which rings have been officially turned off. off. If you're one of the 2 players who stood on a Vex plate a minute ago to get the unique buff, this is your job. Each of you can now step back and look at the 5 rings and see which ones are truly deactivated. They should look like this, no longer glowing red around the outside like the other ones are. To the other players on your fire team who didn't stand on the Vex plate, all the rings will appear to be powered on visually, but again, 4 will actually be off. The 2 players who have the unique buff from the plate need to call out which rings need to be reactivated, and the other players should go kill minotaurs, grab sand, run through the depowered rings, and reactivate them. To keep things simple, here's a call out map for each ring. Just number them 1 through 5, and I swear to Christ, if I see any other call outs on LFG like left top or anything like that, I am just gonna lose my shit. Anyway, 2 players call out which rings need to be reactivated, and 2 other players should go grab sand and start powering the 4 deactivated rings one at a time. When all rings are active, great job. Now, the player earlier who acquired the alignment charge from activating the terminal, your job is to now run through each of the 5 powered up rings one at a time. You'll notice that as you do, you're filling up your charges. When you have full alignment charge, you'll be given a special grenade. Do not waste this. What you have to do now is have the 2 other players who originally got the Vex plate buff, have both of them go out and stand out in the open right next to each other and intentionally bait the boss into targeting them with his high-powered rifle. When their timer gets to about 3 seconds, which they should be sharing out loud, the alignment player with the special grenade charge will run over to them both and hit the grenade button, summoning a protective bubble. The boss will fire his shot, and this will remove everybody's plate buff timer, which is good because if you don't remove it, the buffed players will die. Blocking that shot will also anger the boss, who will then teleport down to the dead center of the map, and congratulations, you can now group up and DPS. Basically, you should bunch up together by the Mohawk after deflecting his shot. Go ahead and DPS until the boss becomes immune and teleports, but be aware, DPS ain't over yet. There's a way to extend it. Basically, while you're DPSing the boss, after a few seconds, you'll notice this on your HUD. Every player on your fire team will now have an empty alignment charge available. Basically, when this happens, just pick 1 person on your fire team to run around again through all 5 rings, and again, this is happening while everyone else is shooting the boss, to acquire another special grenade charge before returning to join their fire team for DPS. Eventually, when the boss teleports away, you do what you did earlier. Have 1 player on your team, doesn't matter who, stand out in the open to bait the auto-targeting shot, then have the player with full alignment charge, aka the special grenade, run over with 3 or so seconds left on their timer, pop a bubble, deflect the shot, and the boss will get mad and come back down for more DPS. Every time you begin a brand new DPS phase, you can use this mechanic to extend DPS 2 additional times. So be sure you have someone pre-selected to be the alignment runner during the DPS phase. DPS as much as you can until he finally teleports away for good, and just start the whole thing over again. Rinse and repeat until the boss is dead. Alright, time for the final boss, Koregos, the Worldline. This encounter is complex and everyone will have a job, but trust me, it'll feel great when you finish. Activate the little white thingy in the center of the main area, basically out on the ground in front of the encounter selection tower, and the encounter will begin. You gotta kill the boss, but first gotta do a lot of stuff to even trigger the DPS phase. When the boss floats up in the air, you'll notice that there are 3 Vex plates relatively nearby on the ground. The left plate is the constant plate this time, middle is the absolute plate, and right is cyclical. There'll eventually be a ring in the dead center of the map you can dunk sand into like the Wyvern encounter, but more on that later. Enemies will spawn into the area, and 3 Hydras will spawn in, 1 by each plate. Kill them immediately, as when they're dead, their corresponding plates will become active. Every player should now step onto a Vex plate, but you won't be divided evenly. 3 players will step onto the constant plate, 2 players will step onto the cyclical plate, and 1 player will step onto the absolute plate. Again, do this at the same time, and you'll know you did it correctly when you get the corresponding buff name on the top of your HUD. Here's what each buff will allow you to do. Players with the constant buff can do 2 things. Thing 1 is look around at floating mines in the area and identify what color each mine is. They'll either be red, white, or bluish green, just call it blue to keep it simple. I'll explain why mine mine color is important later. The constant buff players can also stun the boss. As the boss charges up his big boy laser cannon, you'll notice he has 4 glowing spots around the outside of where the laser is charging. When those 4 glowing spots turn white, you can then shoot each one until they break, which will stun the boss, but again, only if you have the constant buff. Stunning the boss also spawns these around the map, glowing white rings that appear on top of small white pillars. These are hugely important, but more on them later. The absolute buff also allows you to do 2 things. Thing 1 is you can look at the ring and hourglass in the middle of the map when it spawns in and be able to see what color it's glowing, either red, white, or blue. You can also shoot and destroy mines that float around in the air in the area. I swear to God, all of this will make sense. Bear with me. Finally, the cyclical buff also lets you do 2 things. Thing number 1 is you can look at floating mines and determine which are glowing or not. Thing number 2 is you can pick up sand off the floor and jump through the ring with it and dunk it into the hourglass. Now again, 3 players on the constant plate, 1 on absolute and 2 on cyclical, and decide who will have what role in advance. For the 3 constant buff players, y'all are going to subdivide. 2 of you can have the pure job of 100% stunning the boss and nothing more. The 3rd constant buff player should be in charge of looking around and calling out the colors of floating mines. Again, bear with me, it will all make sense. When the encounter begins, your number 1 priority is to make sure that the players with the constant buff stun the boss as soon as they can. Remember I told you that stunning the boss spawns these, aka the glowing white rings on top of raised pillars? Here's why those are important. Every player who is not stunning the boss, aka one of the constant buff players, along with the absolute and cyclical players, they need to be jumping up onto those white rings a lot. Remember I told you that each buff lets you do 2 things? Well, in order to do one of those 2 things, you have to leap up into that white ring to officially activate the second part of your buff. TLDR, the plate buff gives you half of your power and leaping up into the white ring gives you the other half. The 2 players who are 100% focused on stunning the boss never really need to ever jump up into the white ring because they're only focused on boss stunning and have no need for the other half of their power. To the remaining 4 players who need to jump up into the white ring, you should all do a countdown at the same time because these things will vanish when activated and you have a limited supply. Granted, more of those little white ring things will spawn in every time the boss is successfully stunned, but all 4 of you should still be all jumping up together onto the same pillar every time to kind of be smart about it. When you do, you'll activate a timer on your HUD that says Temporal Oculus. It is about 20 seconds in total, and when that goes away, you will need to group back up and jump back into a white ring to reawaken the second part of your power, which you will again need a lot. So when the 4 players who are not boss stunning jump up into the white ring all together, here's the order of operations. Step 1, the player with the absolute buff looks at the ring and hourglass to see what color it is and announces that color to the group. Step 2, the 1 constant player of the group, remember the other 2 are off stunning the boss, will now look around the map and point out mines that match the color of the hourglass. For example, if the hourglass was red, they can locate a floating red mine and say, hey, this one over here, this one is red, and shoot it repeatedly. Don't worry, they can't break the mines, so them shooting them is okay. By the way, I highly recommend that they do this with a trace rifle, as it makes it very clear which mine they're referring to. Step 3, the players with the cyclical buff look at the mine that is being called out by their friend, and they confirm if it is either glowing or not. Glowing is different than colors, by the way. If it is not glowing, that means it's fake, so leave it alone and tell your constant player to look for another mine of the matching color. If it is glowing though, then step 4. The player with the absolute buff officially shoots the mine, it breaks, and sand falls out. One of the cyclical buff players should run over and grab the sand. Repeat this process from step 2 real quick. Find another mine that matches the color of the ring in the hourglass, confirm if it is glowing or not, and if it is, the absolute player shoots and breaks it again, and the other cyclical player now runs over and also grabs sand. Now you should have 2 cyclical players each holding sand. They should meet up together and at the same time jump through the center ring, dunking the sand into the hourglass. They have to do this at the same time because every time you dunk sand, the color on the hourglass will change to a new color. Meaning if you jump in one at a time, the hourglass will change and you'll F up the whole process. So do a 3, 2, 1 countdown and have the 2 cyclical players jump through at the same time. Reminder that after you've done this, or even during the process, your temporal oculus buff will likely run out. And again, you need that to see colors and glows and all that stuff. So when it runs out, all 4 of you now have to regroup together at a nearby pillar, do a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and jump up into the glowing white ring buff together, and keep going. When you have dunked 6 sands total into the hourglass, aka 2 sand carriers jump through together 3 times, congratulations, it is almost time for DPS. Quick note, by the way, the Vex buffed players will die if the timer at the top of their HUD ever expires, but they can refresh that timer by doing a specific action. Constant players can refresh their buff timer by shooting the boss and trying to stun it. Absolute players refresh their buff timer by shooting mines, and cyclical players can refresh their buff timer by picking up sand. All right, back to DPS. The boss will elevate himself way up and raised platforms will appear in fixed locations on either side of him. Your team should kind of learn where these spawn and climb up all together on one side. When you've reached the top, aka you're on the boss's flat body now, just one more mechanic before DPS. There will be 4 little areas that look like this, and you'll see 2 little white lights nearby, and only 2. Pretend there is an imaginary third one right over here, kind of forming an imaginary triangle. This will require 3 players, 1 each with a different buff. The cyclical buff player and the constant buff player should each run over and stand in the spot where they do not see a light. I should mention that each player, depending on their buff, will see different light locations. So again, if you have constant or cyclical, go stand exactly where there is not a light. If there were to be a third one, forming an imaginary light triangle, then the player with the absolute buff goes to the light that is not being stood by and activates that light. For example, I have cyclical here, so I run over and I see that if there were a little light triangle, the third light would probably be right here, but I see nothing there, so I go and stand there. My partner with the constant buff does the same based on her vision, and the absolute player comes over and activates the light that we are not standing on top of. Very quickly run in a circle and do this with all 4 formations in the area. When you've done the 4th one, it is DPS time. Drop a Warlock Well and shoot the boss in the center orb. Look for the small circles. Those are the crit spots. The DPS extension mechanic here is brutal, by the way. During DPS phase, a ring will eventually appear, and don't worry, everyone can see the color of this ring. When it appears, have someone, anyone really, call out the color of the ring right away. Then look around the platform for sand of the matching color. There should be 3 sands total. Again, you need the color that matches. When you find it, when anybody finds it, immediately grab it and run back, then jump through the ring with the sand, and that will extend the DPS timer. You can do that little maneuver 3 times in total during the DPS phase, but the timing is short. If you need to quickly shout at a homie who is standing near the right color sand, do it. If you don't extend the DPS phase here, it will end, and that will suck. Also, when DPS is happening, keep an eye out for these white lasers that are tracking all over the area. Every now and then, maybe un-ADS your weapon and take note if a laser is coming, and if it is, instruct your team to either step back or step forward to avoid getting burned by the laser. Continue DPSing as long as you can, rinse and repeat. When you reach the final bit of health, you will enter final stand mode. During final stand, the boss's crit spot will rotate and now be pointing up. So any crit-based supers like Golden Gun will need to jump and aim down at them. I'd recommend holding all your big burst supers for final stand, by the way. When the boss's health is all gone, everybody jump off the platform to avoid dying, and boom, raid over. If you have any additional tips, please leave them down in the comment section. I am going to bed. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.